Hello. Let me at the very outset greet you in the most precious name of the Holy Trinity. My name is Dr. Annie Gazarian-Drissi, and I'm a program executive for the Commission on Faith and Order. I should like to express my deep sense of gratitude to all our speakers who accepted to be part of the webinar on ecclesiology, namely on Towards a Global Vision of the Church, the last publication of the Commission on Faith and Order. This webinar is the fifth in a series of 6 webinars focused on the 78 responses to the World Council of Churches Faith and Order Commission's convergence document, The Church Toward a Common Vision, published in 2013. As part of the reception process of the convergence document, The Church Toward a Common Vision, the Ecclesiology Study Group of the World Council of Churches Commission on Faith and Order undertook an important task. The Commission broadened the ecclesiological table by opening a wide range of conversations on global Christianity and ecclesiology. The study group took the opportunity to explore the understanding of ecclesiology of evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic, and independent churches from different regions and engaged in fruitful theological reflections with them. This volume offers a perception of the contributions, dialogue, and mutual exchange between the members of the Commission and theologians from all around the world, which took place through a series of international consultations between 2015 and 2022. Most interestingly, although various aspects of ecclesiology from these regions and denominational families may initially seem distant from or even unable to coexist with more traditional ecclesiologies, dialogue with them discovered much more ground, which finally led to a significant growth in convergence. This first volume offers a test of this growth in convergence through the consultation of the Commission with theologians from the Global South. The fruit of this work is here, offered with the hope that it will contribute toward the global vision of the Church in the coming years. Let me now invite my co-editors of the book to share with us the huge work that undertook the study group on ecclesiology of the Commission on Faith and Order, in the way of broadening the table of dialogue. Then we will listen directly to 3 contributors from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, who took part of the Faith and Order study work and contributed in this first volume of Towards a Global Vision of the Church. Our first speaker is Reverend Dr. Mel Robeck, who is an ordained minister of the Assemblies of God. He serves as a senior professor of church history and ecumenism and a special assistant to this president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. He has been engaged in ecumenical work for nearly 40 years, and he has been a member of the World Council of Churches Commission on Faith and Order since 1991. Mel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Annie. I appreciate the introduction. I don't have to say much about it at all, but having been Faith and Order since, 1991 as a member of Faith and Order, but even in 1989 at the Budapest meeting as an advisor, I have really enjoyed working in this particular group. You know, one of the things that the World Council has been very concerned about from the very beginning, 1948, the church and what that means and might look, and how different denominations, churches visualize what or understand theologically the nature, the mission, the purpose, all of these kinds of things of the church. Top line, as you can see, we have developed a convergence document on baptism, Eucharist, and ministry. Of course, convergence doesn't mean that we all agree, but it does show that we are growing closer together in a variety of ways. When the World Conference decided that we should spend more time on the nature of the church, they suggested that Faith and Order pick that up, and Faith and Order produced, first of all, a document called The Nature and Purpose of the church. And in that nature and purpose, there were a number of items that the group that was working on that decided to set aside because they were so difficult and they could not really come to terms in terms of a convergence document. When they brought it back to Faith and Order suggested we need to move on to another convergence document, which was labeled The Nature and Mission of the Church. And that was a better attempt to take the things that had been put into these isolated boxes, bring them into the text, work harder on developing what that should look like. And I think we had greater convergence as the time went on. But that still wasn't sufficient for the Faith and Order Commission. What they decided to do was to put together a third iteration of this, which they called the Church Toward a Common Vision. And there was a great deal of discussion that went on that. We had a single drafter put this together with input all along the way from all the commissioners that were engaged in the ecclesiology study. And I think that has worked very well. That particular document has been very, very helpful. But what we realize also is that it represents the understanding of the church from the Northern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. So Europe and the North America are very well represented in that, but there are large parts of the world's church that are not well represented in there. So all you have to think about is the global South, or you might say that the Church Towards a Common Vision is more or less a high church oriented document. In other words, Orthodox and Catholics will find themselves in there rather easily, but Pentecostals and evangelicals don't necessarily so. So we in Faith and Order decided that we would work further in this past round of discussions in Faith and Order in developing another iteration of a convergence document, looking at expanding the group of churches that are involved in the discussion of ecclesiology. And that meant we went to Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and to many Pentecostals and evangelicals. And I think I will allow Sotiris to pick up.
Thank you for the first part of the introduction. Immediately now already, Sotiris, I am giving the floor to continue, please. And let me just present our second speaker, Sotiris Boukis, a Reverend Doctor, who is an ordained minister of the Evangelical Church of Greece and a member of the World Council of Churches Commission on Faith and Order. Sotiris serves as a pastor of the Greek Evangelical Church of Thessaloniki, and he teaches systematic and ecumenical theology at the Greek Bible College. Thank you, Sotiris, for joining us. Thank you for accepting to speak during our webinar and your tremendous work for the Commission on Faith and Order. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. So as we just heard, we are at the end of a decade of reception of churches responding to the document, The Church Towards a Common Vision, or TCTCV, as we will say it. And we are on the way to another World Conference on Faith and Order, which will take place on 2025, which again will be a culmination of the work that has been done not only on ecclesiology, but in theology over the last years. So during the current round of the Faith and Order Commission, the ecclesiology study group worked in two directions. The first was to analyze and harvest the official responses that were sent to TCTCV. And at the same time, another part of the group worked on discussing TCTCV with a broadened table. Therefore, the task of that part of the group was to broaden the dialogue on ecclesiology by including perspectives which have not always been clearly or strongly part of discussions on the way to TCTCV, and whose understandings of ecclesiology we wanted to discover and to enter into dialogue with. So as Annie mentioned earlier, this included three main categories. We wanted to hear more voices from some regions of the Global South, that is Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We wanted to engage in dialogue with voices from denominational families like evangelical, Pentecostal, independent, charismatic churches, and so on. And we also wanted to engage in dialogue with representatives of forms of being church, such as ecclesial movements, new forms of monasticism, online churches, and so on. Now, why is this broadening so important? I would say that there are at least 4 reasons for which this is not just important, but also strategic. First of all, this responds to a challenge that the WCC and Faith and Order have been facing for years, namely that a major part of world Christianity had not been represented or had been underrepresented in their work. Just think that the WCC represents roughly about 1/4 of world Christianity. Then the Roman Catholic Church is about half of world Christianity. It is a member of the Faith and Order Commission, but not a member of the WCC. And then there's another 1/4 of world Christianity that is about 500 million Christians that was not involved with Faith and Order. That part of world Christianity is not important just in terms of demographics or numbers, but also in terms of influence. Some of the fastest growing parts of world Christianity belong there. So it was a matter of global inclusion, but it was also a matter of faithfulness to tradition of Faith and Order work. You see, the spirit of the ecumenical movement has always been about engaging with the whole of world Christianity. So the table must always be oriented to be broadened as much as possible. Thirdly, it was a matter of continuation with the previous steps. Faith and Order had to continue the task that the WCC had undertaken and has been doing in the last decades by keeping broadening the table, by creating opportunities for interaction with churches that are not members of the WCC and interact with them both outside the WCC structures, for example, through the Global Christian Forum, but also inside them, for example, through consultations that the Faith and Order Commission organized during these last years with representatives from the Global South and other denominational families that we heard earlier. And also, it's a matter of always being able to provide cutting-edge updates. A world-class organization like the WCC must always be up to date with the latest developments in its field of expertise. So Faith and Order has, for example, ecclesiology as one of its fields of expertise. And while it obviously has to keep researching and dialoguing on challenges on ecclesiology that have always been crucial, it also has to be focusing on the latest developments in world Christianity of the last years or decades. It's not one or the other. It's not an either-or question. It's a both-and question, and that's exactly what this new publication is about. Now, understandably, some people may ask, well, does this provide more convergence or less? How can one keep up with all these developments that take part in an ever-changing world where change is not just continuous, but also accelerating? Or some people may ask, why not just focus on the part of world Christianity that is already participating in Faith and Order and has already reached some level of convergence over the previous years? Don't we run the risk to start all over if we broaden more the table? Where interestingly, as Annie also mentioned earlier, the recent Faith and Order work revealed that this broadening of the table is actually leading to more convergence, not less. And there are at least 4 reasons for this. First of all is what I will call unearthing significant common ground. Although many aspects of ecclesiology of these regions or denominational families seem distant from or even incompatible with more traditional ecclesiologies, our interaction revealed significant common ground. If one has the patience to dig deeper, then this unearths that these seemingly different perspectives or churches or denominational families actually share really a lot of common ground with the churches that were already in these conversations in Faith and Order. Secondly, this broadening of the table offered opportunities to build convergence, not just on many issues which had already been identified as points of convergence by TCTCV, but also on issues that have not been addressed enough in the past, or even on issues that have been areas of divergence among WCC member churches. So this whole project led to more convergence, not less. Thirdly, this was also a way that helped all of us address our internal diversity, because many of these diverse voices from outside the WCC reflect a diversity that also exists to a certain extent within the WCC as well. For example, charismatic trends is something that is not present only in charismatic or Pentecostal churches outside the WCC, but even within many mainline churches that are WCC members. So the fruits of our engaging in dialogue with charismatic churches outside the WCC can inform and enrich the way in which we engage with charismatic trends within our churches. And of course, this also reinforces the role of Faith and Order as a protagonist in the ecumenical movement. Faith and Order took the initiative to reach out to these other churches. It did not wait for them to go to her. Today's webinar is essentially about presenting how we broadened the table regionally during these consultations. There were 3 consultations with representatives from the Global South with TCTCV as the starting point. There was one on African perspectives, one on Latin American Pentecostal perspectives, and one on Asian perspectives on ecclesiology. And so each of these 3 consultations that took place focused on one of these regions. The publication that came out in November, Towards a Global Vision of the Church, Volume 1, is presenting the fruits of these consultations. Its table of contents is what you can see here. There are 3 sections, one on each region of the Global South. And in the rest of our presentation today, we will have the pleasure to get a sample of each from each continent and have essentially one of these chapters presented. So this is volume 1, and volume 2 is expected next month, which we will be able to present in the next webinar. So Annie, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sotiris. Sotiris and Mel, both of you as commissioners, and now you have a kind of a vision on the work of Faith and Order on broadening the table of dialogue. And now we are here to listen several voices, 3 voices especially, and as Sotiris mentioned, coming from each region, where we organized our consultations. The first person who will talk now and present, it's Professor Dr. Julie Mai from Asian perspective. And Julie is a professor of missiology and intercultural studies, Oral Roberts University in the USA. She previously served as a Korean missionary in the Philippines and as a researcher tutor of missiology at the Orthodox Center for Mission Studies in the UK. And she was a General Council member and Executive Committee member of Edinburgh in 2010. Thank you, Julie, for accepting our invitation to be part of this webinar and also to contribute to our volume, the last volume, Towards the Global Vision of the Church. The floor is yours. We are happy to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you. The title of my paper is Missional Church Through Reproduction. The subtitle is Multiplication of Church. There are numerous mission perspectives and understandings from many mission organizations and different Christian groups. It is understood that the church is inaugurated by the Holy Spirit, and the purpose of its existence is fulfilling God's mission. Hence, it must be a missional church. Jesus commissioned his disciples in Matthew 28:19. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. I will address my viewpoint on a mission from my involvement in church planting obtained through hands-on experiences for decades, which is a unique underscoring on the reproduction of being a missional church. First, church planting through partnership. Countless missionaries, Western and non-Western, have been involved in church planting as their primary mission work, including Korean missionaries. We make a regular habit to challenge the church to open daughter churches in neighboring communities. In fact, our covenant with congregation is that only through the reproducing work will our partnership continue. This is our commitment to assist or work with them in developing new churches. Such a covenant frequently served to motivate them to start a new house church in a nearby village where there is no established Bible-believing church. In fact, some churches, expecting our strong emphasis on reproduction, will have already started new works before their church building is dedicated. Second, local reproduction. The Kankanai tribe resides in the rugged mountains of the northern Philippines. The Kankanai tribe is one of the tribal group of people residing in the mountain area in the northern Luzon, Philippines, whom both my husband and I worked more than a decade. Tiny villages are reachable only by walking. The normal lifespan is very short since only poor medical services are accessible. Frequently, there are traditional religious practices such as sacrifices and funerals that deteriorate the state of affairs of their life. Balili is an old Kankanai mother church in this region. As the church grew, members living far away wanted to have their own church, particularly for a long rainy season. Hence, the Sebang Church was born in Sebang. In Sebang Church, Miss Piney Bakasan, a young Bible school graduate, certainly inspired a few young people to pray for the Kalangoyas over the mountains. One summer, Piney hiked through the Spanish Trail, which was often infested by communist guerrillas. When she reached the Kogoi, after a 5-hour hike, she discovered some little kids all over the mountain villages. She conducted a vacation Bible school, and rapidly a church was born in this sternly animistic community. Young people from Sebang made almost a weekly trip to Kogoi to reinforce the believers. Through prayer, people were healed, and others were delivered from threatening dreams. In spite of strong antagonism from the village priest, the church grew gradually. Within a year, the church building was dedicated through the joint effort of Balili, Sebang, and Kogoi. At this time, the young people of Kogoi began to pray for another nearby village, Dokukan, as all the Kogoi children go to school in this community. Piney led young volunteers from Kogoi as well as Sebang in a weekly evangelistic journeys to Dokukan. Again, during this time, the young people regularly prayed for healing and deliverance from various spiritual and physical problems. When the church was constructed, the joint workforce consisted of people from Balili, Sebang, Kogoi, and Dokukan. Before the Dokukan building was completed, the newest church had already begun to send their young people regularly to nearby village, Ambakbak. Already 6 families were worshiping the Lord. Now 4 churches are daughtering this village church, and they began to construct the church building and expect to finish it very soon. The ultimate goal for this chain of daughter churches is Tinyuk, the most influential and sizable Kalangoya center in the county. The good news is that already there has been a Bible study at the center of this tribal region. Again, this is a joint ministry participated in by all the mother and the daughter churches. So Balili Mother Church and Sebang First Daughter Church and Kogoi Second, Dokukan Third, Ambakbak Fifth, and Kalangoya Sixth. So Mother Church with the 5 daughter churches made an effort together to build, churches in different regions. How beautiful and marvelous they have been doing in terms of reproducing the churches. I conclude my paper. Due to the similar spiritual worldview of the two Pentecostal and animistic people in tribal society, the gospel was well accepted. Through training and teaching to be a missionary church, the tribal churches became producers of daughter churches, a multi-generational church. These are prime instances of a full circle mission. We can simply perceive a few distinctive structures in this multi-generation development of God's mission within an 8-year duration. The churches have been unsurprisingly captivating the missionary work as part of their Christian vocation. This can be effortlessly credited to the exposure of the members to Pentecostal teaching. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Julie Ma. Thank you for your contribution. Now, as we don't have lots of time, I need to already pass to our following speaker, because I want to keep more time, for questions at the end. And if you have questions, our participants, please feel free to write in the chat, and then we can come back to your questions, and our speakers, they can also answer. Now we are going to fly to Africa, and I will invite Reverend Dr. Christian Tsekpoe, who will speak and present his paper and his contribution in the book, which is on discipleship and ordained ministry in the Church of Pentecost, Ghana. Reverend Dr. Christian Tsekpoe, he has his PhD in theology and mission from the Oxford Center for Mission Studies in the UK. And he is currently the director of postgraduate studies and research at Pentecostal University, Accra in Ghana. He is also an ordained minister of the Church of Pentecost, where he serves as national chairman of the Home and Urban Missions Committee. Christian, please, the floor is yours. Thank you. You are muted, Christian. Please, if you can mute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for that introduction. As you said, I want to speak about the topic, discipleship and ordained ministry in the Church of Pentecost in Ghana. Ghana is a very small country in the western coast of Africa, very beautiful country. Yeah, so I start by looking at Christianity, African Christianity beyond statistics. It's been said that Africa has become a major heartland of Christian vitality in recent times. Beyond statistical records, there is that visible evidence that Christianity is growing in terms of numbers. Of course, you go to churches on Sundays and you see huge numbers of people packed in big church buildings. Of course, new church buildings are being put up on daily basis in Ghana and Africa. The picture you see at the corner here is a retreat center by the Church of Pentecost. It's a very huge retreat center that hosts thousands of people who come there for different programs. Then also, it is very common to see billboards of this nature, name above every name, Jesus. And of course, you see this kind of visible symbols that talk about the presence of Christianity in Africa within our time. The greatest concern, however, has been the extent to which these huge numbers are being disciples to be Christ-like, whether they have really understood their core or whether their character is following the example of Christ has been a major concern. And some of the African churches themselves are aware of this vacuum that seems to have been created in the church and are working towards bridging the gap and making disciples that will look Christ-like and build the church in Africa. Of course, Ghana is no exception. The Church of Pentecost is one of the vibrant churches that is growing numerically and also making the efforts to increase its structures of discipleship and bring people to that understanding of being Christ-like in their everyday life. So the Church of Pentecost actually, in terms of ordained ministry and discipleship, the church depends on some structures to be able to do this particular assignment. One of them is that the church has a huge number of full-time ordained ministers who are basically involved in evangelism, church planting, and discipleship in many aspects of their activities. Of course, and I'm one of them, also involved in church planting, disciple making. On daily basis, this has been our preoccupation. Then also the church has a huge number of part-time ordained lay leaders who are actually unpaid, and they are huge numbers. And the structure of the church is also built around this kind of leadership structure. So the full-time ordained ministers are paid, the part-time ordained lay leaders are unpaid. Then the church also practices what we call bivocational ordained ministers, where a minister is is ordained and then seen as a clergy, not a lay leader, but also allowed to do other vocations like maybe being a doctor, being a teacher, being an accountant or whatever, and at the same time doing ministry. Of course, the number of bivocational ministers in the Church of Pentecost are very, very, very few. But we have huge numbers of full-time ordained ministers, about 1,700 in Ghana alone. But when it comes to part-time lay leaders who are ordained, we have over 150,000 of them scattered around the country in different congregations who support the work of the full-time ordained ministers for church planting and discipleship. Now, what the church does in terms of disciple making is that it begins with evangelism, where every member of the church, once you accept Christ and you are baptized in water, the church believes that as a Pentecostal church, the next thing that should happen to you is that you are prayed for to be baptized in the power of the Holy Spirit. And after that, you qualify to preach the gospel to family and friends. So we don't have specific people that are expected to be evangelizing in the Church of Pentecost. Everybody is an evangelist in the church. Then also discipleship is done in the form of direct mentorship or apprenticeship model, where matured Christians are expected to mentor younger ones. And then, of course, I'll quickly talk about some of the structures that have been put in place for this also to be done. Then, of course, discipleship takes place at all levels of the church's structure. I will mention that structure very soon and briefly in my discussion. So here, these informal discipleship structures that are used in the church began to take shape by developing within certain contexts, where discipleship models have been part of the church's structure, informally, as I said, but formally, now new structures have been developed within the church. as I'm going to talk about now. The first one is that now there are structured new convert classes with books that are specifically designed for these new convert classes, teachers that have been trained to actually take care of new converts that join the church on daily basis. There are specific topics that are treated with these new converts over a period of 1 year. They consistently take them through basic doctrines of the church for people to understand what it means to become a Christian. Unlike in previous generations, where people come to church and then it is assumed that matured Christians who are already in the church will mentor them. Now there is a specific class that you will need to go through as a new believer to become a disciple that can be seen as somebody who can also grow. By the time you finish this new convert class, there are what we call ministries within the church. And these ministries are sometimes gender-based and also age-based. So we have women's ministry, men's ministry, we have children's ministry, youth ministry, and those kind of ministries. By the time you finish new convert class, your teachers will help you to identify when next, whether to enter into the women's ministry, men's ministry, children's ministry, or evangelism ministry, or the youth ministry. Then the leaders of this ministry also have specific syllabuses that they use for discipleship. So that also continues. Then beyond that, there is this Sunday morning Bible study classes also structured with the specific topics that are treated all over the country on specific Sundays. And they are structured into the liturgy of the Sunday morning service. So service begins up to a point. Everybody breaks into small groups within the same chapel, church building. Various groups meet, and then people go into discussions of specific Bible topics that the church deems appropriate to help members to mature. Then beyond that, there is also Sunday evening home cell group meetings. This one is not done every Sunday like the Sunday morning. This one is done only once every month. That is the second Sunday of every month of the year. People meet in homes of individual members who are closer to their residents. So you can get about between 5 to 10 people meeting in a particular person's home. And that one too has a syllabus, which specific topics are discussed with somebody designated as a teacher for that particular home cell group. All these are aimed at helping people to become disciples and mature. Of course, there is the National Discipleship and Leadership Development Committee that is responsible for this, but in the structure, this has been decentralized to what the church calls Area Discipleship and Leadership Development. That is a smaller jurisdiction. This area has also been decentralized into districts until every local congregation has local discipleship and leadership development. Now, what this committee does is to supervise all the activities I have explained earlier on, the ministries, the new convert class, Sunday morning Bible studies, home cell group meetings are supervised. Then on every 6 monthly basis, the leaders account for their activities. Then evaluation is done where there is the need to restructure. The church tries to restructure and then relaunch for another year or another 6 months. Then beyond that, the final thing I would want to say here is about theological education and leadership training. The church has a Bible school where I also teach, School of Theology, Mission, and Leadership. And what the church does is that every new minister that is called into full-time ordained ministry of the church would have to go through 1 year theological training, which is residential and very vigorous, for 1 year before you are posted to the field. And after you are posted to the field, the church also requires that you will continue to do a modular level theological education up to a first degree level. This one has become almost mandatory for all ministers of the Church of Pentecost since the last 4 years of the church's life. every minister. So the first batch who are going through this particular training are now in level 300 of their career. You finish 1 year, go to the field for 1 year, and then within your 3rd year of being in ministry, you start the level 200 and continue to level 400. Then also lay leaders are trained in this same institution through short courses that are also organized. Then also what we call the Church of Pentecost calls Officers Retreat is also organized annually for both ordained ministers and lay leaders who have already been trained. Becomes like a refresher course. And all these people are expected to support the discipleship structure of the church. All the leaders of the discipleship groups are supervised by the ministers, the lay leaders, both of which we call officers in the Church of Pentecost. So this is what the Church of Pentecost is doing, and is being encouraged within contemporary times to make sure that discipleship is given a priority to take care of the huge numbers of people who are responding to faith to make them Christ-like. I think that basically this is what I want to say about discipleship and ordained ministry in the Church of Pentecost. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Christian Tsekpoe, sorry for the pronunciation. And thank you for taking us and presenting the whole understanding of discipleship in the church. And now it is time to go to Latin America. So we are going to listen Dr. Elizabeth Salazar Sanzana. Elizabeth is a Chilean theologian, historian, and religious scientist with a PhD from Methodist University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. She is a professor at the Theological Evangelical Community of Chile in Concepcion, Chile, and an instructor for the Masters in Theology program at the University of Lee in Quito, Ecuador. And Elizabeth will speak in Portuguese, and if you want to have the interpretation, you need to click on the interpretation globe in the bottom bar and choose the English language in order to follow her. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your contribution, and the floor is yours.
Pontos a considerar. Eu vou rápido para não tomar
So I will
muito
speak fast in order to not take so much time.
A maior parte do movimento pentecostal
Most of the Pentecostalism, the movement of the Pentecost,
tem aversão ao ecumenismo.
it has developed with an aversion to ecumenism.
Essa reflexão considera suas
And
limitações,
so this reflection considers its own limitations
pela
because of the
diversidade do
diversity of Pentecostalism.
O movimento ecumênico tem a
The
dificuldade
ecumenical movement is
pela diversidade do mesmo pentecostalismo.
fragile because of the versatility of the Pentecostal movement.
Eu sou muito optimista
I'm very optimistic,
e minha percepção
and my perception
está sempre desde esse olhar.
is
Optimistic.
always through this vision, this optimistic vision.
As igrejas pentecostais,
The Pentecostal churches,
como falaram meus colegas,
as my colleagues have earlier said,
a centralidade é o testemunho do evangelho
the central piece of it is the, I'm sorry, she's stopping and I can't hear her very well.
para o pentecostal é confessar a fé,
For the Pentecostal to confess faith
dar testemunho claro
means
perante
to
o
provide a clear testimony to the world
e dar razão da fé.
and to give account of faith.
O outro ponto
Another
importante
very important point here
é que ser parte do corpo de Cristo
is that being part of the body of Christ
leva a entender como uma
takes us to
grande,
understand. I'm sorry, she's breaking up.
grande bênção de ser parte do
It's
corpo.
as a big blessing to be part of the body of Christ.
Para o pentecostal,
For the Pentecostal,
é confirmação da missão de Deus,
it is a confirmation
o
of the mission
crescimento
of God. Growth is very important. It confirms the mission.
a Julie falou de como
As
as
Julie
igrejas crescem. Da África vem a voz de que as igrejas crescem.
From Africa, we've heard the voice that the churches are growing,
Isso é muito importante para o mundo pentecostal.
and this is very, very important for the Pentecostal world.
Não é o número das pessoas,
It is not a matter of only the number of people.
é o fato que o crescimento
It is the fact that growth,
pessoal
the personal growth,
e de número de membresia
and of the number of membership
é confirmação
is
da
the confirmation of the blessing of God.
O outro que é muito importante de considerar
Another
É
point
que-
that's very important to be considered
que o documento que nós temos
is that the document that we have
é muito concordante com o que a igreja
is in
Crê.
accordance with what the church believes in
e confessa.
and confesses.
O outro que para mim é muito importante
Another point that for me is very, very important
é o fato que o
is the
pentecostalismo
fact that Pentecostalism
entende a pregação do evangelho
understands the preaching of
a todo
the
canto, todo lugar.
and practice of evangelization in every place and any place.
E leva a transgredir
And it takes us to transgress
toda barreira racial, social, econômica,
any economical, social, or racial barrier.
a igreja chega no canto onde ninguém mais chega.
Churches reach places that no one else reaches.
Pelo que o pentecostalismo leva a
As
estar
Pentecostalism takes us
onde a humanidade tem esquecido que tem pessoas em dignidade.
where humanity has forgotten that there are people.
Eu vou saltar vários pontos para que já está no documento. Para
I will I will skip a few points that are already in the document for the sake of time.
tá? Eu acho que uma das
think-
grandes dificuldades
One of the greatest difficulties
é a linguagem agressiva que tem no pentecostalismo
is
com
that
ao
many-
catolicismo.
many times we have an aggressive language in most of Pentecostalism against the Roman Catholicism.
Temos que trabalhar isso.
And we have to work on this.
O outro ponto que nos ajuda muito para
Another point that helps us
Conversar.
very much in order to have a dialogue
são os logros, as possibilidades de diálogos já feitos.
are also the possibilities of dialogues that have already been done.
Meu documento foi muito no olhar do que acontecia com o documento e os
My
estudantes pentecostais.
my document was based on the perspective between on the students, the Pentecostal students.
Dois pontos eu acho que a gente tem que
I believe
continuar
that we have
trabalhando.
2 points that we should continue working on
Que pode contribuir
that
no
may
diálogo
contribute in the dialogue
do mundo pentecostal e a visão da igreja.
between the Pentecostalism and the mission of the church.
Tem que ver com a
One
visão
has to do with the vision
da inerrância, a infalibilidade da
of
Bíblia,
the inerrancy and infallibility of the scriptures of the Bible.
o fundamentalismo
Fundamentalism
nas igrejas.
is very strong in the churches.
E este ponto é muito importante para trabalhar.
And this is a very important point to work on.
O outro ponto tem que ver com as mulheres.
The other point has to do with women.
Nos primórdios, na gênese do pentecostalismo,
In the genesis of the Pentecostal movement,
as mulheres tiveram muita importância.
Women
Muito importante.
had a very important role. They were very important.
Hoje, o pentecostalismo esqueceu essa importância.
Now it seems that Pentecostalism forgot about this importance.
E hoje perdeu muito do liderazgo das mulheres.
And now we have lost many women leaders.
Eu acho que o documento ajuda para o pentecostalismo repensar a missão com esta visão de gênero.
I think that this document will help Pentecostalism to rethink things according to this view of this gender view.
Só para acrescentar no final,
And just to add now, in conclusion,
eu quero colocar o fato que para o pentecostalismo,
I want to put forward something that for Pentecostalism,
a fragmentação é parte da forma de ser igreja.
the fragmentation is a way of life of being of the church.
Não é ponto negativo,
It is not necessarily a negative thing,
porque a missão é feita dessa atomização.
because that is how the mission is made, through this atomization.
A outra ponto é o fato que a centralidade da igreja
Another point is that the centrality of the church
está na escatologia presente e futura.
is in the growing eschatology and the future eschatology.
Toda a eclesiologia pentecostal
All the Pentecostal eschatology
está centrada na esperança de mundo melhor.
is centered on the hope of a better world.
E isto que leva sempre à missão de todo o corpo de Cristo.
And this is what always takes to the mission of the body of Jesus Christ.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I'm sorry for the misunderstanding that we had. We prepared the translation, from Portuguese into English, but you're already in Spanish. I'm sorry for that. But for our participants, I have to say that we have, the publication online. And if you wish to have the presentations and the written papers to read the entire papers, so I will share in the chat, the link of the book, and you can access and you can read the papers. We have one question on this coming from Pierre Yuguda, who asked us if our presenters can share with us their presentations. I don't know if our speakers here are ready to share with us, with the WCC, your papers, maybe, and then we can share also with our participants. We are already at the end of our webinar. I don't know if our participants, they have a little more time, and if you have questions, you can still raise your questions and write in the chat. I can maybe transmit, and our panelists, they can read your questions. Please feel free to write. And but in this moment, I just want to ask a question, not a question, but more ask Sotiris to give us a little bit more information about the volume 2 on the Towards the Global Vision of the Church, in order to prepare already the final webinar that we are going to organize by the beginning of July. As the end of this commission, you know, the ongoing commission is coming to its end with the Central Committee, and the new commission will start its work and will continue, will pursue the work with the broadening the table of the dialogue. So I would like to listen from you, Sotiris, about the second volume and what is your expectation in the future, how the work will be continued. Thank you.
Sure. Volume 1 focused on broadening the table of conversation regionally by including more voices from the Global South. Volume 2 will have 2 parts. The first part will focus on how we worked to engage, to broaden the table also denominationally by engaging in further dialogues with theologians from evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic, and independent churches. So there will be some chapters analyzing some of the major bilateral dialogues and official theological statements of Pentecostals or evangelicals, and what these documents say on ecclesiology in comparison to TCTCV. And at the same time, there will be some chapters which will bring evangelical and Pentecostal perspectives on ecclesiology as these were reflected in some of our consultations. Then the second part of volume 2 will be an attempt to harvest the fruits of all this work of the last 8 years of Faith and Order work. The Commission has especially identified some key themes that were emerging. So just as the official responses to TCTCV were showing some major themes which were published in the publications of Faith and Order from the previous years in the process of the reception of responses to TCTCV. So here again, we have some key themes, and interestingly, some of these themes, quite a few of them actually, overlap with the key themes that were identified in the other publication named Common Threads. So Common Threads is the publication harvesting the key themes from the official responses, while volume 2 of Towards the Global Vision of the Church, which will come out on June 2023, will be harvesting the fruits of these conversations of broadening the table. Now, as you can understand, there is great potential for further convergences in the future. And for sure, there's a need to keep broadening the dialogue and keep broadening the table and continue unearthing points of convergence. The goal of having one consultation in each continent of the Global South, obviously, the goal was not to finish the broadening of the conversation, as if that was even possible with just one consultation per continent. The goal was to have it begun, not finished. So I believe we got a taste of how a broadened table could be in the future, and I'm very sure that the best is yet to come. So we can wait and pray for that.
Thank you, Sotiris. Thank you very much. We have another question from Martin Höger. Hello, Martin. Do you have some results of the work of the Global Christian Forum in relation to Pentecostals in Brazil? As it is about Global Christian Forum, Mel, I think this question is for you. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, to hear from you as well. I don't think that we have really done a great deal of work on the Global Christian Forum. Certainly not focused on Brazil as such. We recognize, those of us who are involved in the Global Christian Forum recognize the continuing need for further discussion. And we will be holding our next major global meeting in 2024 in Ghana, actually on the grounds of the Church of Pentecost. So we're looking forward to that. But no, we have not done anything within our work here on the Global Christian Forum per se, though we do talk a little bit about it in several of the essays.
Thank you. Thank you, Mel. I think we're coming to our end of the webinar. I'm coming to you, our panelists. I don't know if you want to say a final word. No, it's fine. So thank you so much to all of you, Christian, Julie, Elizabeth, Mel, Sotiris, our interpreters. Thank you very much for this moment spent together. So our participants of the webinar, so stay with us and follow us on the WCC website. We are still going to have one more webinar, as it is a series of webinars, 6 webinars. I shared already the first 4 webinars website, so you can go and follow, of course. And in July, by July, at the beginning of July, we believe that we will have the final webinar on the 2nd volume. And thank you for your participation as well, and see you. Bye-bye.